fish are friends, not food.
I'm a little worried about Rob.
Yes, it's happening.
Ever since we tried to summon Cthulhu, he hasn't been the same.
I'm growing gills. Gills! My transformation into a deep one has finally begun.
Rob, we don't see any gills.
It's these kids getting involved in all this stuff causes them to go crazy.
I think I feel the webbing starting to grow between my fingers.
Welcome to Dinner and a Board Game, a new actual play show about friends, good food, and lots of fun at the gaming table. We're your hosts, Megan and Heath. Each night, I'll invite the gaming group over to my house to cook dinner, sample drinks, and play a board game on one of our customized board game boards. Dinner and a Board Game is an actual play show where you'll be able to watch the game from start to finish with gameplay dashboards and graphics that help track the turns and allow everyone to follow the game's action. We'll play games like Zombicide, Black Plague, Descent, Journeys in the Dark, Small World, Unearthed, and Terraforming Mars. We'll even be joined by special guests such as Lou Anders, J.F. Lewis, and cosmic horror artist David LaRocca. The show is free to watch on YouTube. Just come by my channel, Heath Robinson, and be sure to subscribe. Click Watch Now to start the first episode and join us for fun-filled evenings of Dinner and a Board Game. And now it's time for General Geekdom, the roundtable show about movies, games, books, and other things going on in the fantasy and sci-fi genres, as well as all the geekverse. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 8th episode of General Geekdom. And we've been doing this once a week, so that means that it's been 2 months since I decided, hey, you know what? I should start live streaming and doing some shows and things like this. So this is one of the shows, the General Geekdom show, that I decided to create. And so if you're enjoying it, please like, subscribe, let us know in the comments, because maybe we should keep going. Tonight's topic is going to be myths, storytelling, myths and legends, and storytelling, especially about their retellings and how we will go back to certain stories, but also certain story structures, and hear them time and time again and enjoy them time and time again. Our special guest for tonight is Maxwell Alexander Drake. There's by Drake there in the center. He is the author of many different things and many different books, but the one that I most connected with, and the reason why I invited him, is because he wrote this book, Dynamic Story Creation, and I went to see a lecture of his when I was at Gen Con on story creation, and I thought it was fantastic. So if you have an opportunity to see him talk on this subject, it was a fantastic lecture. As soon as I got out, I went right over to his booth in the hall, and I picked up a copy of the book. And if you look at my copy, I don't even know if you can see, but I've got all kinds of red highlighting and annotation and things like this in this book, because ordinarily I'm not a big fan of writing books. I've read several of them because I'm working on stories and writing myself, but I'm not really a big fan. I found in general they haven't been that helpful, but there are 2 that actually have been. This one, his book, Dynamic Storytelling, and then people will ask what the second one is. So the other one happens to be The Secrets of Story by Matt Bird. These 2 books sit within arm's reach of me right here at my desk. And if I'm having a problem with the story, no joke, one of these 2 books fixes it. So, Drake, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for the invite. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll let everybody go around here and introduce themselves. We can start with Drake and then go to Megan and then Brennan and then Dax. Let everybody know who you are and what it is that you do, and then we'll get started talking about myths and storytelling. And we got 8 people already in the chat, so thank you so much. This is already close to a record attendance for General Geekdom. So please like, subscribe, and we'll be checking out the comments as well if you have questions. All right, Drake.
So I'm an award-winning novelist. I do teach writing all over the world. I have launched a online training platform. So if you can't get to a convention or a writer's conference or whatever that I'm at, I am working on that. It's Drake U, so it's pretty easy. I did unfortunately spend the last year fighting cancer. So my life kind of got put on hold during that time. But we're back at it. For about the last month, I've been able to start really working again. So hopefully we'll start getting some videos up on that. Probably most famous for being the lead fiction writer of Sony's EverQuest Next. I am a writer on a new game that I can't talk about because it hadn't been announced yet. And then, yeah, I just do a lot of writing.
All right. Thank you. Megan.
I'm Megan Pecco. I'm a costumer and actor. I've worked with Heath on Dinner and Board Game and The Cultists. And I'm currently about to be in some shows, but can't say quite yet. But we're hoping to get another round of Dinner and Board Game out too. So I'm excited for that.
I'm hoping we can do those this fall. All right, Brennan.
Yeah, I'm Brennan. I'm a filmmaker. Currently, I'm employed at Spectrum doing commercials as a 9-to-5, and I'm freelancing on the side and currently working on a script for a short film I'm hoping to direct sometime next year. Just finished the first draft, and hopefully we can go through a few more versions soon.
All right. And Dax?
Okay, you'll know me as Rob from The Cultists. I do a bit of acting and production assistant work wherever and whenever I can.
All right. So our topic then is myths, legends, and their significance especially as we retell them time and time again. And actually, the first thing I thought of when I thought of this topic was actually one time years ago when I was in church on Easter Sunday, and the pastor was talking in his sermon about something like trying to get the kids to church on Easter Sunday again. And the kids are like, why do we have to go to church on, Easter Sunday? They're just going to tell the same old story anyway. And so I thought, well, yeah, but that's actually very similar to, well, first of all, we have that as, biblical myth and biblical storytelling, but that we could generalize that idea from that, well, there's a lot of times when we go back to hear the same story over and over and over again. Of course, first of all, sometimes we watch the same movies or read the same books over and over again, but that's not exactly what we're talking about right here. We're talking about retellings of things like King Arthur or biblical myths or all of the Greek myths that we hear over and over and over again. We hear the retellings of the same story, but we also hear retellings of the same structure over and over again. So, on a fundamental level, we have like one type of story that we've got, and then we'll retell it with that structure. So I hope that we're going to be able to talk about both during our conversation today. Megan, one of the things that you and I wanted to talk about quite a bit for a long time was King Arthur. So this was our opportunity to do that, because that's definitely in the categories of stories that we tell and then we retell and we retell. There are all kinds of versions of King Arthur, and something that we keep coming back to. So do you want to start us off with this idea of King Arthur and why we keep going back to it and what we love about it?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind is all of the different retellings that I have read, because it just never really gets old for me, and I love seeing what other people bring to it. I'm really attached to Mary Stewart's Merlin series, which I know is a family favorite for us, which I think is an incredible retelling. I'm also a big fan of Mist of Avalon, and Merlin tends to be a lot of what I follow with that. But The Lost Years of Merlin by T.A. Barron is a young adult novel that I actually grew up with as well. And all of these, I mean, they're all going about the same story, but something about it is timeless. And the characters, I think we can relate to. Even now, they just had the Green Knight come out, which I loved. I don't know what y'all thought of it.
I was a fan of the Green Knight. I did like it. I also like to read all the different tellings of King Arthur. We should do a show sometime about things that have not gotten to show, or a movie or something like that should. And the Merlin trilogy, I need to read again, because that would be on the list. I don't know why that one hasn't been picked up. Drake, do you have thoughts on King Arthur? You have a lot of fans in the chat, by the way. So we're seeing lots of people coming to support you. Showed up for Drake. Dude is phenomenal, and he's fairly down to earth. Drake is the man. So lots of people, lots of your fans would come out.
Well, I disappeared for the last year. So
They're excited.
yay. Hi, everybody. I don't know. So I was thinking about, as always, I showed up this with literally no prep work whatsoever, because that's kind of my MO. But I was thinking about how it permeates just pop culture and society in general. Because this happened really weird. So in 2019, I started plotting out a 20 novel fantasy saga. Not writing it by myself. It's me and my 3 proteges. So hope we should have gotten out this year, but we're hoping to get out next year. The cool thing about it is, even those 20 novels, once it starts dropping, we will drop a new novel every 3 months for 5 years. But with one of my really closest friends, we started playing D&D together in elementary school. I think we were about 8 years old, and we've been friends ever since. So I was walking through, once I got enough of the plot done that it was coherent and fit together really well. I use him a lot as a sounding board. He's not a writer, he's an engineer, which means he thinks completely different than me, which makes him the perfect sounding board. And I don't know, I was maybe halfway through it, and he goes, "Oh, so you're pretty much just retelling the Bible." And I was like, "What?" Huh. And he's like, "Well, this is that, and this is that, and this is that, and this lines up perfectly with that." And I was like, wow, it hit me out of left field. I had no idea that he could even draw those parallels. But once he pointed them out, sort of that once you see it, you can't unsee it. But there was nothing conscious about that. It just, these stories are so prevalent in everything we kind of do as a society that, it just kind of comes in. Because I tend to try not to go down paths of things that have been done. I try to, it was one of the weird things. My first meeting with Sony, they said, "So we really want you to come work for us, but you got this thing on your website that you need to take down." And it was a sign that said, "Stop regurgitating Tolkien, down with elves, dwarves, trolls, and dragons," because I refused to write any of that stuff. And then I literally wrote nothing but that stuff down. Kind of what EverQuest is. And actually the video game that I'm working on now, elves and stuff, although this 20 novel thing is called Realm of the Dying Sun, it is high fantasy, so it's traditional, although I still take very, very different takes on as much as I can. So the thing I like about what I'm doing with that, and this is just, it kind of ties into our topic, is as a writer, you got to understand that your readers are going to come in with baggage. They're going to come in with preconceived notions. And if you're a fan of that genre, you should know what they're thinking and what they're, assuming is going to be happening. And if you're good with that, you can use it as breadcrumbs to build a road that they think they're on, and then just yank it right out from under them. And so I do love taking advantage of the fact that, I say, "And then here's an elf," and you're like, "Oh, I know everything about elves." And then I just take that left turn at Albuquerque and never look back. So it's kind of the same thing with some of these classic stories. It's, yes, some people have done, great retellings of them, but you can also use them in ways that you're not really going to follow them, but you can make people think you are, and then do different things with them. And so that's what I tend to do. But it is kind of funny how much this stuff has permeated into all of our brains. But like I said, I think I was alive when they were writing the Bible, so I was kind of there for the inception of it.
I just like how we know the characters so well, and being able to take those, because I feel like the ones I said earlier take these characters on completely different routes, but we all come into it already very attached to the characters. I don't know.
Well, on a different note that's exactly down that line, there's a reason why fantasy books with dragons on the covers always outsell those that don't, because everyone loves dragons. So it's kind of the same thing. It's just kind of understanding the psychology of the readers and kind of leveraging that to your advantage, not in a bad way, like in a good way, but because you're fulfilling what they're looking for. There's a reason why genres exist in publishing, because, some people, like my wife, is a huge murder mystery fan. I don't read them unless I am forced to. Everybody has their thing that they really enjoy or really don't enjoy or whatever. And so that's why there are so many genres.
Dax or Brennan, You
We got Dax coming in and out over here.
Dax coming in and out.
I
Brennan?
think Dax is handling his setup. I don't know. I'm not really all that familiar with Arthurian legend, to be
I'm working
honest.
on it.
It's the Green Knight. The movie was the first Green Knight exposure I'd ever had, so I'm kind of coming at it from a different perspective of, I know these things have been around and I know that they've been told time and time again, but I'm kind of in the crowd that's like benefiting from their retelling because I've never heard them in the first place, which I think is great. I think that's probably the best thing about retelling is it's whether it's faithful to a story or not, that I think may not matter as much. It probably matters to some people, but getting people familiar with something and into that sort of fandom to get the ball rolling with them, and they can go back and explore this huge library of whatever later. Yeah, it is a heck of a start to Arthur. It wasn't my first Arthurian legend film, but it was my first. It was my first Green Knight story. I think my first Arthurian legend thing was like the Disney Sword in the Stone.
Oh yeah.
I think that was it. And it was good when I was 8, and I just didn't look further into it for some reason. So I'm kind of coming at the whole thing from a different perspective, but I'll pitch in where I can. I just like that things keep getting retold.
Well, I think that actually, sometimes we've started with a conversation about the conversation. And actually, I think some of the stuff that Drake said in this was important to talk about why we're doing this anyway and why this happens. Because years and years ago, I would have said that I was against structure or formula or something like that. Let's do something completely new. And that's probably a way that somebody would have, a lot of people would say in the very beginning, we got to have something else. But now, well, especially structure is my best friend when writing. If it's not well structured, you've got the same structure that shows up over and over again. And even to the idea of formula is a bit different from structure, I would say. But then again, there are some things that are very formulaic and they have worked and have been extremely successful. And so when we hear a retelling of something from the Bible, these are but told in a different way, in a way that you said you didn't even necessarily pick up consciously that you were doing that. These are the stories that have stuck with us. They have been around for a long time, so obviously they have endured. There's something about them that has this structure, right, and that we tend to repeat. And now I'm not against it at all. I'm thinking that if you can come up with a new way to retell something, then that's great.
Speaking of biblical retellings, has anyone here seen the movie Mother by Darren Aronofsky?
I have not.
Oh man, that's a really fun biblical retelling. You should go watch it. It'll cheer you up.
That Frank says the Green Knight reminded me in mood and style of the movie Excalibur, and Excalibur was one of those movies I think that was ahead of its time, in what it was trying to do. But that's another way that we go on the King Arthur thing. I think it's really interesting the way that you've got the story of King Arthur. We talked about how you have common elements, how that's one way that you could possibly do like a canon is to have common elements. He's got a sword, it's either Excalibur or possibly Caliburn. He sits around a round table. He's got knight. But like I think of Mary Stuart's Merlin trilogy, like you, Megan. The Acts of King Arthur and His Noble Knights that was written by John Steinbeck. I mean, that is extremely classic, high medieval retelling of King Arthur. He's not trying to put him in historical context or anything like that. I mean, those are, high medieval ages knights, and Arthur with a high medieval king of Britain or king of England. And there's no attempt to put him in historical context or anything. That's just the story. And I think it's fantastic. Contrast that with something like the Warlord trilogy with Bernard Cornwell, which I also love. But then there is your Dark Age King Arthur trying to be something in a historical kind of context. And I think that it's that the themes of King Arthur reoccur through all of those, even though you can have this very different way of telling those stories. Is Dax back?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, we got audio with Dax now. Dax, did you hear any of that? Do you want to chime in?
I just came in so suddenly. I'm not prepared to.
Okay,
yet.
no problem.
No.
I'm gonna remove.
I was gonna add, like, there is something to just the names. Like one of the things that I did in the Fiend Folly cartoon, one of the characters, so there's 5 characters on my shirt. A lot of people are like, wait, no, there's only 4. So the sword, sorry, I'm backwards. The sword is actually a character, and his name is Excalibur. So like, and it's a fantasy world. So it's not like necessarily that Arthur exists in this world, but I'm not going to rule it out either. So, but just having that name in the series lends a lot of weight to it and brings a lot of baggage in that readers are instantly going to go down a path and think, oh, where's this going and how is this going to fit in? And am I going to see this? I'm going to see that. And then again, just being able to play with kind of what I'm guessing that readers are, in this case, watchers, but or viewers, but just guessing what they're kind of going for and what they're looking at and so on and so forth. It's one of the reasons why I'm really loving this new video game that I'm working on. Because at least all the quests that I'm writing are not just about, well, first of all, I'll never write a fetch quest. I told them that in the beginning. You'll never get a fetch quest out of me because I hate playing them. I'm definitely not writing them. But I do try to write every quest because I'm doing a lot of the side quests. I'm writing all the little books that you find in the world and everything like that. And I do try to write quests that have a moral kind of dilemma to them. Like it's not just, oh, I'm going to give you a quest to go kill those bad guys. You go kill those bad guys. You come back and get your reward. I don't really like writing stuff like that. I want to make the players kind of have to decide. And I think that's the big thing that draws us to Beowulf and King Arthur and Robin Hood and all these things, because it's not just, I mean, these are the reason why they're timeless is because it doesn't matter what time you live in. We are struggling with those exact same things. I mean, I'm not religious, even though I did spend a 10-year period reading 10 different versions of the Bible, plus the Quran and the Mahabharata and just a whole bunch of different religious texts.
Same here.
Yeah, they're just, it's human history. But, oh crap, sorry, chemo brain. I do this. The only thing I hate about coming out of this treatment is chemo brain is real. So I do go down a path and I just don't have any idea where I was going. So they're all about, those values of digging in when basically everything is against you. What decisions do you have to make? And I think that's the thing that makes them so timeless is, I know what I was going to say. It always takes me about 30 seconds for my chemo brain to kick back in. One of the most amazing things about reading the New Testament, and my family's very religious, so as a child, I went to church, every single Sunday. But reading like the letters from Paul and being in the church back then, and then, talking about the 70s, it literally was like Paul was writing to the people at the church that I went to, even though it was 2,000 years ago. There's no difference. And I think that was the thing that shocked me the most, because you expect people to have lived different 2,000 years ago, to have different ways of thinking about things. But it's shocking how little us humans have actually changed. And so you take a story like Beowulf, which is, depending on which estimate, but 1,800, 3,800 years old, somewhere around in there, or 1,800, 1,900 years old, somewhere around in there. There's a reason why it has survived all these centuries, because there is a kind of a human struggle pull to it that makes you want to read it again or experience it again. And same thing with Shakespeare. The reason why Shakespeare has been done so many times is because we can always relate to those. Maybe you can't relate to the language because the language is old and dead, but you can still relate to the struggles, especially if it's redone in modern times using modern vernacular or whatever. You can absolutely relate to those things.
So I guess that is why we continue to do this, like why these things keep resurfacing, why Arthur, Robin Hood was one that I was also thinking of when we're talking about these biblical stories. Then we're talking about values and themes that we all deal with as humans, and they're told then, and so they get told now.
Yeah, I mean, I think of that. You brought up Shakespeare, which is something I'm a lot more familiar with within the theater, and I can talk on that a little bit better for myself. But just like things like Macbeth or, any of the love stuff, it's just people being people. like you said, and we will always have betrayal, we will always have love, we will always have death, and that's a lot of what, I mean, even the Arthurian stuff too deals with, and it's always going to be around.
Live long enough and you will experience tragedy. It's just the way it is. And then now it's, how do you get past that tragedy? How do you get over that hump in life? Just to make this a little more personal to me, cancer kills 1 in 3. And I'm thoroughly convinced that the biggest reason why so many people die from it is because they can't do the treatment. The treatment is literally the crap show that they advertise it as. And I know I've talked to so many people that had, friends or relatives that started it and went 2-3 weeks into it, and then were like, nope, I'd rather die. And then that is what happened. So I think that's the thing. And for me, that's the thing that I feel attracts us to stories. It's that ability to fantasy fulfill in a situation that you're not in, to see what it's like. Well, like I always say that my job, and this is not everybody's job as a writer, but I feel my job as a writer is to take my readers or my audience from the safety and comfort of wherever they're at, put them in an incredibly uncomfortable situation, drag them through the mud so that hopefully they become a better human being at the end of the journey and never leave wherever they're at. And so, I do believe that is what attracts people to stories. That's what we want to accomplish. That's what we want to see. We want to feel like we have done something that has made us better, even though technically we didn't actually do anything. We're kind of a passive participant, but there is a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in making people think about your life and those around you and how you act and, what's important to you. And, I can't think of a single parent that I've ever met that saw Finding Nemo with their children and didn't walk out of there going, man, I really should think about maybe being a little bit better parent or changing this aspect of how I parent or whatever. That is the thing. It's literally what it's there for.
I'll go take care.
You're all right. Well, you and I got a lot of similar opinions. I need to read what you write.
Definitely said, inspired here.
I didn't do any homework before I came in, so I just met you. I've just heard about you, and I need to. What video game are you working on right now, by the way? I know this is kind of a side thing, but I
can't say.
Can't say. It's God of War 3.
So first of all, it hasn't even been fun. So I did a bunch of pre-work for them. I wrote a bunch of short stories. I wrote a bunch of. It's a German company, and English is not their first language. So I spent a lot of time just rewriting the pitch documents and everything they were doing for the distribution company that they're trying to get. And now we're kind of in a holding period because they're waiting to see if they get funded. So technically, even though I still work for them, if they don't get funded, then the game won't go forward. So we're just supposedly by the end of September, we're supposed to find out. And then I don't know when they're going to announce the actual game. So I can't because I am under an NDA. So until they say that I'm able to talk about it, there's nothing I can do. But it's a fantasy game. It's actually the third version of this. Hasn't been out for a while. It was an old PC game from the 90s, which is why I was so stoked about it, because I was right at the time where I'm hardcore into video games. Not that I don't play video games still every single day, but that was definitely the time when I'm in my 20s and really into the technology as it's evolving. I was born the same year as the internet, so we've grown up together.
That's awesome.
Journey.
Okay. Well, Dax, did you want to jump in now?
I think I do want to add to what Drake was talking about. We started talking about, the value of these stories like King Arthur or the Bible. But what we ended up getting into is how most stories that are told involve these themes of love, betrayal, tragedy, etc. And yet most stories don't survive to be retold for generations and generations. And we also notice that over time, I mean, in my opinion, I think storytelling gets better with time. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at the way that stories are structured in Greek mythology or in the Bible, I don't think they're bad stories. I'm definitely in agreement with Drake that there's great structure there. But I also think when I read the basic Bible stories that the characters are very flat compared to how they might be written today. And so I wonder sometimes when it comes to the stories that did not grow to the same degree of popularity as things like King Arthur, I wonder, like, there had to be other stories with these themes going on around that time. I wonder, if they have flat characters and they had flat characters too, like what is it that makes one survive over another? Yeah.
Depending on how far well, first of all, I was going to say a rebuttal on the Bible stories is I don't think they were literally trying to write great stories. I don't think that was their goal.
There is doctrinal intentions in some of the stories. Yeah.
But, one of the things is just really what really changed in storytelling was the printing press. Like one of the fantasies that I've always had is, people are like, oh, if I could go back in time, I would do, kill Hitler, whatever. Mine is always, I would go back to the Library of Alexandria the day before they burn it to the ground and literally just rob every single thing I could get my hands on. Because how many stories were there in that now that was the only copy? And there was hundreds of thousands of scrolls and, text and everything else. And that are just gone. Like we'll never even guess at what was in that library. So
that's the tragedy.
So one of the things is just that we as a species didn't have an ability to really capture this stuff except for verbally. And so, the oral tradition it has to stick. It has to have something that resonates with you to make you want to then tell it to the next generation. Like, hey, this is very important. This will give you a leg up. When I heard this, it opened my eyes to what I need to do in life. And so those stories tend to kind of
me too.
Me too, Ashley.
Those are the ones that I think resonate. I believe that about Beowulf. Now it was written down as well. So that was the other thing is, Beowulf was written down on stone. And so it survived a lot longer than something maybe that was just oral tradition or whatever. So there's a lot of reasons why some of these stories existed. And I think a lot of it has to do with luck, just blind.
Yeah, I would say if it happened to get written down, if it made it that long, because so much, like druids, we don't know anything about them because there's nothing left because they only spoke it and it got wiped out. So how much of it is just that it managed to get to the point that it could be written and now it's
And then another reason certain stories live on over others is like their civilizational influence. So for example, the Epic of Gilgamesh is like the earliest story we have on record. And this story shares a lot of parallels to Noah's flood, but it's actually older than the earliest writings we have of Noah's flood. The stories serve different themes. What's really interesting about it to me is that Noah's flood and Epic of Gilgamesh are not telling the same theme, not the same moral lesson. Noah's story is about, God keeping his promise and Noah being loyal. Gilgamesh isn't about that, but they still have these really apparent parallels. And so a lot of Bible scholars and just kind of literary professors in general have kind of come to the conclusion that people would take these old Mesopotamian stories and these old Canaanite stories and sort of rework them to give a new life to it. I think that's so interesting how we take templates and rework them. Yeah.
You have Moses writing the first 6 books of the Bible, if I remember correctly.
First 5, yeah.
The Hebrews were an oral tradition storytelling group of people, society, whatever you want to say. So they didn't just appear. Like they came from other people whose societies disappeared and people were scattered and changed. And, that's just been the way human history has always been. So yeah, absolutely. I believe that too. When I went on that 10-year pilgrimage down, basically every religious text that existed, that was one of the things that I came to a conclusion to as well, that Noah's Ark probably has some deep
got
roots
old
from
stuff.
the story of Gilgamesh. And I don't want to
Yeah.
be, I'm not trying to tread on anybody's religion here, because obviously, depending on how you feel, then no, it isn't, and which is fine. I'm not going against that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I came to the conclusion, just kind of looking at it from a storyteller standpoint and looking at the two stories and comparing and contrasting. And but there's so much of that, because you're 100% right. I mean, we as a species have always told stories. Like, we've never uncovered a race, a society, no matter how far back we've gone, that didn't have religion and stories. Like, those are the two things that they always have, and they kind of go hand in hand, because they are things that enlighten us, that try to make us better or more knowledgeable, or whatever you want to say about them. Not all of them, obviously, but I think that's kind of at least the altruistic view of when they're started or what they're supposed to be doing. And so, yeah, I mean, again, and like what I said about the realm earlier, about my friend saying, that I'm obviously rewriting the Bible. You don't see that. Like, that's a very high level kind of looking at things. Because again, like I said, he's an engineer, but it still is my belief why we kind of write the way we write. And tell stories the way we tell us. It's the reason why probably almost 90% of all stories today follow the hero's journey, which is exactly what Beowulf, which is exactly what King Arthur, which is exactly what,
Yeah. Even Gilgamesh. Yeah.
100%. And so why is that the case? Because the people that created those, the people that first had to sit down and think, okay, I want to tell a story. Well, I mean, I do the same thing in my jokes. So I'm not an improv guy. But if I'm in a conversation with people and something comes up with a joke, I'll rewrite it in my head 2 or 3 times to see which way is the funniest before I say it. And hopefully I can get it done before we've moved topics and I'm just coming out randomly about something we talked about an hour ago. It's like, and then the plumber came. I was like, what? So somebody had to sit down and go, okay, what do humans really need? And what is the order that they need to consume this stuff in to make it have impact? And just over the 7, 8, 10,000 years that we've been consuming these stories, it's just not only do I feel that like the hero's journey is designed to give humans what we need when we need in a story, I also believe that the hero's journey has actually shaped us into, kind of being forced to accept it this way as well. Like we've seen these stories, we've read these stories so much that just kind of, without even thinking, subconsciously, we know how the story is going to unfold, because every story kind of unfolds that same way. So it's sort of the chicken or the egg theory. And I've literally contemplated this for years, because I think about weird crap, of how much is it that the hero's journey was created versus how much of it is the hero's journey created us as readers. So
we do definitely expect it. And I've even found myself in watching something or reading something that I definitely have expectations of where the character is going to go, and maybe disappointed when it doesn't follow what I think is the correct path.
And, that's the danger. He said at the beginning of this, before he got into structure, he was like, oh, I want to do it all new. The problem is, and I have an entire chapter about this in the book. You might give them something. I mean, that's where you take your big risks. So I think in the book I have something about, I invite you over, because I do all the cooking. I grew up cooking. My family had restaurants, so I still love to cook. It's a form of art, in my opinion. But what if I said, I want to invite you over to one of my dinner parties, and we're having a new type of meat that I invented. It's not fish, it's not chicken, it's not beef. It literally has never existed before until I just invented it. You'd probably be like, oh man, I got to do my hair that night. I'd love to come over, but
some people would be in, but other people would
absolutely be in.
Andrew Zimmerman has entered the chat. Yeah,
it depends on if there's other options, man. If it's just that meat, I don't know,
but that's the thing about stories. If you come off the traditional things, that's why I prefer to take advantage of what you are expecting, because I'm still kind of giving it to you I'm just giving it to you in this twist that you're like, oh, I didn't even see that coming. Wow, that's an interesting way to have, done this or whatever. So I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just putting new hubcaps on it. So,
Yeah, this reminds me of a talk I had with a friend of mine who he's been getting into writing recently, but he's had his own story in his head for many years now, and he has this fixation on being original. Whenever a show comes out, or especially a reboot of a beloved franchise, he's quick to say, "This is not original. This should be more creative." And I don't think any of us here object to originality, but sometimes I think people miss the point, and it's like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel with things. It's okay to borrow from a basic template, a basic formula, or even like just a similar story that we can all point to and say, hey, that sounds like King Arthur. That's okay.
It's what science does anyways. I mean, a lot of the times new things come from following the hypothesis, etc.
To me, in storytelling, it's a very narcissistic, arrogant statement to say, I'm going to write a story that no other human being in the last 10,000 years who's been telling stories has ever come up with.
Hubris is unreal.
Like, no, you're not. You're literally not.
You're not. Yeah. In fact, this reminds me. I was doing an outline for a story I had about. It was a story that was going to involve artificial intelligence, and it was going to involve. This is just the basics. I'm not going to say too much about it, but it's going to involve a man who decides to raise a child that is not a real child. It only exists in virtual reality. Okay. And I thought this was such a neat idea. There's so many ways we could go with this. And then like a month later, after I wrote down the footnotes for this idea, I watched Steven Spielberg's AI. And then I was like, holy shit, he already made this. My God.
But that's the thing. So like one of the things that especially at Comic-Con, so I'll have a line sheet for whoever comes up. So if a director or producer comes up and talks to me, they're like, hey, do you have any projects that you're looking at doing? And I always have this sheet of maybe 10 different stories that I may never write, but they're cool ideas. And so I've written them down, and they're kind of they're in the layer right below the layer that I'm feel confident that I'm going to write. And a lot of people that are around me when I do that, they're like, I can't believe you just gave away 10 good ideas. I'm like, I didn't give away anything. And they're like, yeah, I read those. Those are fantastic. I'm like, yeah, but they will never be written the way I will write them. Like, yeah, the reason why you can have 10 meteorite destroying the Earth movies come out in the same year, and it doesn't matter. They're all going to be different. So ideas are not that important to me. Execution is the important thing to me. And that comes from the talent of the storyteller, period.
Yeah. And I used to have this fear of telling people about my story ideas. And, it was like this thought that, if I tell it to somebody who's like further up in me in screenwriting, they're going to steal my idea. And it's like, well, I guess they could steal my idea. But the thing is, whatever they write is going to be so different from what I do that it doesn't matter. I can't fault them.
Which is completely different than some of the stories that I had written for Sony that they were releasing got plagiarized and thrown up on Amazon under some other author's name. But, that was the nice thing about having Sony and their massive band of lawyers. And that got taken down in like 30 minutes. But yeah, there's a difference in that and plagiarism, because, everybody all stories have been told, but it's just like a guitar. There's only so many strings, there's only so many frets, and yet I don't think you could ever run out of combinations to make a completely unique song on a guitar. Writing is the same way. And so, reading these classics, understanding the structures, that's why I preach it so hard in the dynamic story creation. I preach you have to learn structure, because if you don't, well, you have to learn everything. You have to learn grammar. You have to learn, whatever. And in grammar, especially, you've heard you can't break a grammar rule if you don't know it. But for whatever reason, people don't apply that to story structure. And I'm like, it's the same thing. You can't break a story structure rule if you don't understand it to the nth degree, because then everybody will just notice that you broke it, and they will not enjoy what you've done because you did it accidentally. You had no clue of what you were doing.
On the
Brennan.
note of execution is everything, I would love, Drake, for you to make a dramatic and heartfelt Sharknado movie. I think that's what I'm really hungering for in the world.
So,
An Academy Award winning Sharknado.
Yes, that's a great challenge.
so I am a B movie fan. I freaking love the me and my son, when my youngest son, when he was growing up, we would do a movie that we call it 1 Star Saturdays, where we just get on Netflix and just start looking for just only movies that have horrible reviews, and then that's what we would watch. And I've always had this, and I'm just so busy. I've always had this thing in the back of my mind that I'd love to take like 3 months off every year and $100,000 and do an actually well-written B-level movie and do one a year. Just crank them out.
But if it's well written, is it even a B movie?
Oh yeah, at $100,000, it's definitely going to be a B movie.
Okay, so B movie is defined by the budget alone. It's not defined by the quality of the writing.
But see, but the writing comes in that. So COVID stole the movie script from me, movie sale for me, and talking about a massive kids movie, $40 million budget minimum. They were talking between 40 and 60. We didn't get that far because of the shutdown, and then they backed off on everything. But I make a percentage of the budget, so like it was a huge paycheck loss. That's bad. That really upset my wife. But more so than that, it's also what attracts writers to projects. So yes, budget does have a lot to do with B-rated movies, but it also attracts, like, I'm a tie-in writer. And the reason why so many companies want me to tie-in write for them, even though I charge them 4 times what any other tie-in writer does, is because they know they're going to get a very high-end product that is well thought out and well. And so also why I refuse to do their deadlines. I always require 4 times the deadline, length of deadline, or I won't write it. And it's, when you're paying for whatever, like tie-in writers average make 5 cents a word. When you're paying that level, you're talking, $1,000 for a 20,000 word story. I can't live off $1,000 a month. And, I hate to bring it down to money, but it's my career. It's my job. It's how I pay for this house. And the kids, now they're 18 and 20. So I'm paying for college and, everything else. So that money has to come from somewhere, or I have to go get a job at Walmart or whatever. So you get what you pay for. That's kind of the point that I'm getting to. So if you have $100,000 movie and the writer's making 3% of that budget, it's not the same as making 3% of a $60 million movie. It's just going to attract a different level of writer, or not necessarily attract a different level of writer. It's just that writers that have the skill to write something that's going to make bigger money are going to go down that path, and they're not even going to talk to other people. But again, I love B movies, and I would love to do that. It's kind of the point of Fiend Folly. That's why I started working on Fiend Folly, because I don't think that anybody would ever do this. It's not that's gonna be the hardest thing. I was going to pitch it in 2020, but the shutdown, and then 21 saw me with cancer. So we'll see what happens in the future. But the biggest reason why I'm doing this, I just don't think that it exists out there. And now with the streaming market, it's a whole different ballgame. Same thing with Guards. Guards that I'm doing in-house. Yeah, I've got an in to Adult Swim. I'm doing this 12-minute episodes for that specific reason, to see if Adult Swim picks it up. But if they don't, it's just going right on YouTube, because there are now different avenues. And Guards is a different, I've got much more things that I'm doing with it other than making money. It has a bunch of reasons for why I'm doing it. And the last reason is to make money off of it. So if it goes on YouTube, I still accomplish all of my goals, except for the making money part. But, that's you got to kind of think about this. And unfortunately, I always hate when my discussions go here, because now you start seeing the business side of art, which is the side that artists.
Well, we do talk about the business side in general on this channel, on Table Talk, and in here, and also try to talk about that very straight. So it's not like the business side of things is verboten on this channel or these streams. You will never be successful if you don't think about that. How many famous, massively famous artists that their stuff is selling for millions of dollars died broke? Same with writers. Lovecraft died broke. This isn't a strange thing for us. Nothing. There have been some comments come in. I was going to say something about the news. We've got the stuff. I don't know exactly where this came in, but nothing is new. We won't know that you've ever recreated it, but it has or will have been done. I think it's what you were talking about later. Yeah, you're not doing something new. I do not believe nothing is new. I do believe we get lazy and assume we can't create anything, but that hasn't been done before. Many myths are remakes of legends. A good portion of Shakespeare is inspired by legends he learned from studying Latin for many years as a youth. So I was going to say that in business, since we were on the business side of things, a saying that often comes up in business is that, well, you don't have to have a completely new idea that no one has ever had before in order to start your business, but you are going to need something like 10 to 15 or maybe 20% new. 10 or 15% new may be... Kindred Echoes was talking about the Library of Alexander of that, but that you can have an idea that somebody else is already doing and they are already operating as a business. But if you are 10 or 15% new, then it can definitely work for you. You're adding something to the market and that you're doing that and you can be successful at that. I've kind of thought about that in terms of storytelling as well. Where are the stories that people love, and why do they love them? And why do I love them? Because I do too. But then, okay, so I'm going to tell one of those stories, on a fundamental level, but where is the 10 or 15% new that hasn't been seen before, that people, don't just have out there that I can bring and people will go and they will notice that. So they're getting all the stuff they like on that fundamental structural level of the stories that they know, the motifs, the themes they love. That's all there for them. But then they've got this new thing that's drawing them in.
So I want to qualify two things because you're right. We're jumping into this from a weird angle. So first of all, it's not necessarily that you're just going to use everything that's been used. You do have to new. And so first of all, in dynamic story creation, I kind of made up my own little theory on stories have two layers. They have the invisible layer and the physical layer. We've pretty much been talking about the invisible layer. You just brought in the physical layer, combining it with the invisible layer, which I think a lot of writers misjudge. And that's the reason why I wrote it as two completely separate layers, because you kind of think about them separately. The invisible layer is the one that is very much the same time and time again. I mean, one of the things that I do in class that for whatever reason I get a standing ovation every time I do it, but I do this stupid little thing where I go through the synopsis of Star Wars and then I go through the synopsis of Harry Potter, and all I do is just change, Luke to Harry and Hagrid to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I literally, that's it. This on the PowerPoint, it just changes names all the way through, and it's the exact same story. So that's the physical layer. The physical layer, 100%. That's 100% new. You're making a new, making new races, making new magic systems, making new cultures, making new religions, but that's not a story. Those are just things, and those things don't make a story. They don't. What I always say is the story is what the reader leaves with. Period. Yeah. When you think back to something that you loved, most of the time you won't remember every detail of it. You'll just remember how it made you feel. And you're like, oh yeah, I read that book 15 years ago. I love that book. And they're like, well, tell me, every detail of it. And you're like, I mean, it was basically about this character that kind of did this. And you really don't remember every single detail of it. Like the one I love to do is, I always say, do you remember when the scene, because you had it in your trailer, in Finding Nemo, where they ran into the sharks and it was fish was food. I'm like, do you remember what happened right before that scene? Remember how awesome that scene was before the fish or food scene? And everyone's like, no. I'm like, that Dory. Like, that's a very important scene, but you don't remember that stuff because it doesn't matter. What matters is how the story made you feel. So that's the invisible layer. What you're talking about here is the physical layer. Now, 100%, that's going to be brand new. You cannot have Jedis using the Force on Tatooine and write a story about that.
No.
Not only will you get sued, but also that's not, that has to be new, or the readers won't even go into it.
Well, right. But I was talking about, we've done the story what they've had like in the Old West or something like that. We got 6-shooters. Now I'm going to do the story, but now they're going to have laser beams. Okay, there's your new part.
We have to rethink new. What we mean when we say new does not mean reinventing the wheel, okay? It can mean just changing the physical layer of things that Drake is talking about.
And then also on the invisible layer, you can mix how it's done. So like you just brought up that there was unfortunately it didn't go anywhere because the artist is also fighting cancer. He's been fighting cancer for like 10 years. But I wrote a thing that me and a Magic the Gathering artist were going to do called Dead Ned. And it's basically a Cthulhu Western. So yeah, have Westerns been done? Yeah. Have Cthulhu stories been done? Yeah. Has anybody ever done a Cthulhu Western? I don't know. Maybe, but
Shadows over Brimstone.
Okay.
It's not a. It's a board game. That's a board game, but it does have like 6 shooters and Cthulhu.
Because some people pull out Jonas Hex, and I'm like, it's not really Cthulhu though. I mean, it's kind of supernatural, Western, if you want to call it that. But even if somebody has done it, I don't care. If somebody just listened to this and knows that it's just a project sitting on my shelf that until either Silver Vanderhagen gets over cancer or, whatever, I'm not going to do anything with it for a long time. So if somebody's like, ooh, Cthulhu Western, you're not going to write anything that I wrote. So take it, run with it. I don't care. And when I'm ready to put mine out, I'll still put it out. Like it doesn't matter to me that other people have done stuff.
So I have a question I've been wanting to ask for a little while. We kind of veered away from structure, but we can kind of tie it back in with structure and newness of the physical layer. But I'm a big fan of the Coens as a filmmaker. They're just great, and I think their stories are very, very differently structured than a lot of things. I'm not crazy different. I think there's a lot of inversions and things that they're related to, but definitely different. And the one that sticks out to me the most would be something like No Country for Old Men. And I'd be curious to hear your take, like, on sort of how the structure of that fits in with what you've been talking about. Like, is it closely related to the hero's journey? How does it differ? And then also, like, if we're also looking at the subtext or the invisible layer that you were talking about, I'd be curious, like, where do you see No Country for Old Men? Where do you see that same story being told previously? Like, where do you see other iterations of that?
So it's been too long since I've seen that for me to just sit here and break it down at that level. Okay. I probably saw it when it came out, or the year, maybe the year after it came out. So it's been a really long time. I've had cancer since then.
Touche.
But the beautiful thing about the hero's journey, so the third book of the Drake's Brutal Writing series is just it's Drake's hero's journey. I'm just plagiarizing and just jumping right onto that hero's journey bandwagon. The beautiful thing about the hero's journey is there's tons and tons of different things, but they can be mixed very differently. I mean, you can have things, look at Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption has it lets you know the answer to what type of character you're following, which you normally do in Act 1 and at the end of Act 3. Like, you actually find out that he's actually innocent, which is so beautiful because in Act 2, they play with that. When he comes into Shawshank and he's like, but I'm actually innocent. And every single prisoner's like, me too, I'm absolutely innocent. And so they're actually playing with the whole, yeah, of course, every prisoner thinks they're, or every convict thinks they're innocent. And so but can you do that in every single story? I don't think so. It worked with that one because it worked with that one. Finding Nemo, you get the Atonement of the Father is the scene at the end of Act 2 when Marlin runs into the stone turtle. So the Atonement of the Father is when basically the character is presented with kind of the ultimate of the theme. It can take it to the bad side if he doesn't change, or he can take it to the good side, and this is what you need to change. And so the stone turtle is that this is the type of parent you should be, dude. And had you been this parent, your kid wouldn't have gotten kidnapped, and you wouldn't have had to do all this bull crap. But he's not ready for it anywhere else. And yet it happens in Star Wars at the beginning of Act 2 when, Obi-Wan is killed. So it just kind of depends. I mean, there's the exact same tool, if you want to break it down like that, yet used at 2 completely different times in the movie, because they actually, if Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan at the end of that Act 2, it wouldn't have had the impact that it has at the beginning. If he runs into the turtle at the beginning of Act 2, it wouldn't have had as much impact as it has at the end. And so I think that's where the talent comes into. So you learn the structure, you learn all the different things and again, most things are written off the hero's journey these days. And even if you don't know structure, like, that's the funniest thing that I find. You get amateur writers that have never taken a single writing class, and you read their stuff, and it's basically the hero's journey because that's all they've consumed their entire life. And so naturally they kind of fall into that same pattern without even realizing that they're falling into that pattern. So for No Country for Old Men, it's literally been too long. I will do that. Like, it was a great movie. It's just been so long since I've seen it. But I guarantee you can go through, if you understand the code, and go, okay, so that's this piece, that's that piece. And that's really what I do when I watch movies or read books or whatever. I'm always looking at the code going, that's an interesting way to have mixed that. Oh, look how they put those out of order and how well it worked. Or the flip side, look at how they did those two and it absolutely broke this movie or broke this story, whatever. But the building blocks are still there, but you don't have to use all of them either. Mm-hmm. Like, one of the things that this isn't a building block of the hero's journey, but one of the things that you hear all the time in storytelling is, especially in movies, you have to have a romance. You have to romance, the B story.
Oh God, they push it so much.
Right.
Yeah.
So where's the romance in Finding Nemo?
Yeah.
I mean, Marlin's a widow or a widower. Dory is single. They obviously kind of like each other. Why wasn't there a romance?
Most children family animated movies are like ruined when studio executives say, okay, this has to have a romance. Yeah. It's usually not earned. I don't know.
It's got to fit. But here's the thing. When you break it down to a code level, when you look at the themes that they're playing with, so you have two story arcs in there. You have Marlin's story arc, which is for the adults. It's the what type of parent should you be? And you have the Nemo story arc, which is the coming of age, first time away from your parents. You have to make your own decisions and rely only on yourself. Yeah. Both of those are based in fear. And everything happens. The child gets kidnapped. You've got to go into this dangerous world. Every theme that they're fighting is based in fear. And same thing with Nemo. Love is not based in fear. So from a fundamental just structure level, when you start mixing themes that are antithetical to each other, they don't necessarily make for a better story. They can. I've seen it work, but 9 times out of 10, that's where usually the story breaks, is because you've actually taken themes that have different, bases that are driving the audience to care about that story and to relate to that story, and it muddies the water. It's like, wait a minute. And it's like having a horror, romance, sci-fi, fantasy, chick flick. Like, if you just throw in every single genre, it's not going to be a good movie, because it's just, you're muddying the waters. Not that somebody might be able to pull that off, but as of yet, I've never seen it.
You didn't watch Everything Everywhere All at Once yet, did you?
No. And I literally haven't watched anything in over a year now.
Oh, man.
Okay. Let's jump. Let's do just a slight bit of housekeeping, and then we will move on with this. I wanted to let everybody know, first of all, the Terra Tiles terrain systems will be launching on Tuesday. So if you are in the tabletop gaming and you need an easy, no printing, no painting solution for your terrain system, you can check out this channel. There's information on Terra Tiles on the channel. It'll also be launching on Tuesday. But also last Saturday, I put out a new trailer for The Cultist Season 2, which is going to be coming out on this channel very soon. So I'm going to give you The Cultist Season 2 Dungeons and Dragons trailer right now, and then we'll be back with it.
I attack the dark. 30-10 psychic damage.
My parents are out of the house today. I invited the guys over for a little D&D.
So do I get to cast spells?
Yes, you're a wizard.
I am?
That's my spot!
Oh yeah? Well, why don't you come over here and do something about it?
So I'm gonna take Steve out. How are you gonna do that? I'm gonna cast Power Word Kill. Kill, kill, kill!
What happened?
First they start playing Monopoly, and then they move on to Dungeons and Dragons. The next thing you know, they're worshiping demons and drowning themselves in lakes.
Can't even cast a practice spell right.
I think you're just not high enough level to cast Power Word Kill.
I will not stop until Steve is destroyed. Edith, target, conditioner, saving throw.
All right, so in about a month and a half or 2 months, there's going to be more material on The Cultist coming out here. We're trying to make the season 2 big. We've got behind-the-scenes information, things about how we made the show, interviews with the cast, all that kind of stuff will be coming out, as well as a board game. So please, if you're here with us in the comments, please like, subscribe, and be with us. Okay. I had one question about the earlier story structure, and then I wanted to talk more about alternates to the hero structure, because we had this idea that we had brought up that perhaps like things like the biblical myths and things like that were not as well structured.
Yeah.
And
well, no. I didn't, sorry, if you're talking about my comments, I said they were well structured, but that the characters were flat compared to how they would be written today.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
We did have that. Thank you, Adam
Yeah,
Mikkel.
I mean, just as a side note for that, I've written several musicals with a pretty famous orchestra musician dude, and right before I went down to cancer, he had reached out to me because we hadn't done anything in a while, and he's like, "We really should do stuff." And he literally said this Bible story. I'm not gonna say what it is. 'Cause I don't want to step on any toes, but it'd been I've read it obviously, but it'd been a really long time, and I was like, I kind of remember that story that I wasn't impressed with it, and so I went back, I read the whole thing, and then I write him an email. I'm like, "What do you want as a story from this? Like, there's no like, it's terrible. Like, literally, it's just everyone murdering everybody, sleeping with everybody else's wives. Like, what are you wanting me to, how do you want me to write a musical about this? I'm not following." Unfortunately, like I said, I went down to, for the next year, but he just reached out to me. Obviously he's been in contact this whole time, but he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, are you ready to get back into this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess, but I still have the same question. Like, I don't understand what story you want me to write." Because the characters are, exactly like what you're saying, Dax. The characters are just awful. They're just awful people that did horrible things, and nobody gets punished. And it's like, I don't.
Wait. Okay, can I guess what story you're talking about? Will you tell me if I guess correctly? Okay, are you talking about the wandering in the wilderness with Moses?
No.
Oh, are you talking about Solomon?
No.
King David.
But that could.
Yeah. Okay, never mind.
Okay, but all those do fit kind of where I'm going.
Yeah.
I think this one's worse. I think this one's literally worse. But anyway.
Yeah.
But we have like a friend of
This
mine,
was
Luke
the old
Andrews,
hero's
talks about
journey.
Well, I think we could talk about an evolution, because if we talk about like one of my favorite biblical stories, Samson, okay, he also follows a very similar structure to, say, Hercules, and their structure at its simplest level is those heroes do stuff, and then they die. And there's a whole bunch of stories like that that have that don't have the same kind of arc that we would associate with a modern story. And I think that's interesting that, like, for instance, Matt Bird in his Secrets of Story, he basically says in here that we have, 100 years of film. And we can take all those films as basically a corpus for what works as a story and what does not. Basically, in kind of a data-driven way, figure out what needs to happen at certain points. If you're trying to make films that are an hour and a half to 2 hours, like what we do, here is what it needs to follow. And when it does that, these stories work. And when it doesn't, they will not work. But things like Hercules does not. So I wonder, if you did Hercules or Samson as they were written, would you have to adjust them to a modern story structure in order to get them accepted by an audience today?
So Cohen has a thing called story structure, and I do disagree with that. Like, here's the formula, here's an Excel spreadsheet, plug in your story, and it's a winner as long as you plug in the exact right pieces, because there is a talent to it. There's differences between the impactfulness of moments in your characters' lives, and if they are not in the right order for that specific story, I think that's where you go awry. And so many times that's kind of what causes a weak story or whatever. So I've never been one that follows that. I think you should learn them. I think you absolutely need to do structure. There was a lot of great stuff in Cohen's Story Grid book, but he was also an editor. And so reading that, the number one walk away for me was, yeah, you've never written a story, have you? I mean, I could just tell. And I didn't really know anything about him at the time, but then I studied him, and he was this big Hollywood guy, and he kind of followed the same thing that you were talking about. It's like, no, here's this perfect formula, and we already know that this works and that doesn't. So that's one thing. Secondly, I do believe that audiences change. And I don't mean change like trying to figure exactly how to say this. So first we got, when the information age hit, we became much more savvy story consumers, because in the information age is when we started consuming stories constantly. And now the way the internet is, like, you cannot not consume stories unless you go into the woods and cut yourself off from the internet.
Well, you also have critique. You also hear a lot more critique too.
100%. Yeah, the Monday morning armchair quarterbacks are rife in the world. But unfortunately, the trend that I've seen over the last, and this is going to make me very unpopular, and I always hate saying stuff like this, but because of the rise of self-publishing and print on demand, the gatekeepers are now gone. And so the gatekeepers were never perfect. You look at the stories from the 70s, 80s, 90s, there's tons of crappy stories or crappy books. But there was still a gatekeeper. There was still somebody other than the story creator who loves the story no matter what, who would go, you know what, that really sucks, and nobody needs to see that, read that. It's just go away. We don't have that anymore. And in some aspects, it's great. The Realm story, there was a couple of publishers I talked to, and both of them wanted it, but they wanted to put out one book a year. And I'm like, I'll be 108 when this finishes. No, the whole point of doing this 20 novels is they're going to come out one every 3 months. And they were like, well, we can't do that. I'm like, yes, you can, because I can do it. And I'm not a massive publisher like you. So like, I'm indie press in that, because I couldn't get anyone to meet the kind of the reason for why I'm doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have no issues. The creative writing books were also indie press. Those were my first big indie press books. And I had publishers that want that, but I was like, no one knows me. So if it's on a bookstore shelf and you're looking at some schmuck book from this guy named Drake and Stephen King's On Writing, you're not going to buy my book. You're going to buy On Writing every time. But if you hear me at lectures, then you're going to, like you said, go down to my booth immediately and buy the book. So why would I give a publisher the vast majority of the money if I'm going to be the salesperson selling all the books? I'm only 10% of my book, my work. So it was stupid for me to do that. And now, because indie press has changed so much, but where I'm getting to on that, I'm trying to get away from business. I do believe that has trained readers to actually accept worse quality stories, because they're reading so many of them. And I have seen them now. I've seen people that 10 years ago would have not even read 3 pages of something that they're reading today. And they're like, well, I mean, it's not very well written, but I really love it. It's great. It's one of my favorites. I'm like, how can you say it's one of your favorites when you start off with the words, it's not well written? Like, that just seems like an oxymoron to me. So yes, I do agree with you that definitely we have changed. But sorry, you're throwing text that I have to read. But
people have changed.
Oh, that's the other thing. Sorry, chemo brain. But there's another aspect to it, and that's society. Things become very, very successful a lot of times because of what society is going through, fearing, whatever. Jurassic Park is cool. Would it be as successful in 2022 as it was in 1980? I don't know. In 1980, we were just struggling with the ideas of, wait a minute, what if science could make something like a Tyrannosaurus Rex? Do we really want to do that? We're past that now. Nobody cares. Elon Musk is making an army of androids. They're gonna control us all, and I'm happy with that. Let the robots take over. They will do a much better job. But like, we're past that fear of this whole, should science actually go further than what it is? And so you do have to think about that. All the social stuff that's coming out in these last couple of years in movies and stories. It's rife because this is what is in society. It is what is driving people's thoughts, I guess I should say. I'm trying to be kind.
Do we have, I'll go from there. Let's we talk about the hero's journey a lot, and we have here. And when we're talking about structuring things, we've talked about the hero's journey a lot. Is there another example of a structure that is not the hero's journey that can be used and is talked about? Maybe the answer is no, once this be a short conversation. But
I don't know. There's
about structure and so what are other examples of structure that's not the hero's journey?
Well, some other modern day examples, and they do have a lot of elements of the hero's journey if you want to nitpick, but like the redemption arc, the revenge arc, you know, these are all stories that don't necessarily have this, they just don't have the same trajectory. You know, one of my favorites to talk about is The Hitman's Bodyguard, because it's two redemption arcs wrapped inside, you know, wrapped around each other, with the Samuel L. Jackson character and the Deadpool character. What's his name? Ryan Reynolds. Both of them are trying to redeem themselves in very, very different ways. Wait, I'm in a thingy. Sorry. If I go to the bank, can I check this myself? No. Give me. We got like 30 minutes. Sorry, it's my child. Well, I'm meeting right now. Okay, ask your mother. Sorry.
The ultimate answer: ask your mother.
Exactly. So getting back to the redemption arc, but one of them is trying to redeem what he thinks he wants, and when he gets to the end, he realizes that he was on the wrong path the whole time, and so it isn't actually a true redemption arc, where the other one is actually trying to redeem himself because he is on the right path, even though the world thinks he's not. And so it's beautifully written. It's one of my favorite just redemption arc kind of stories if you want to see how it's done perfectly. Romances also are a little bit. Now you can have hero's journey romances as well. But with a romance, it's always about the romance. It has nothing to do, you know, the story, the adventure, everything else is secondary. So it just kind of depends on how you're mixing it up and how you're using it. The problem is that the hero's journey is so all encompassing that you're going to find elements of it in everything. And if you want to be, you know, that guy, you can say, no, it's also the hero's journey. And technically, I don't think you could be proven wrong, because there is, I mean, the hero's journey is so massive and it has so many different elements into it, because it was, you know, it was Campbell saying, I'm going to read every story that's ever written, and I'm going to put every little piece of every plot device that they used into this thing called the hero's journey that I'm going to, you know, invent. So it's hard to do that topic, because this is a path that I've gone down several times, and you know, people have asked me questions about that. Yes, the answer is, but also depending on how you want to look at it, no. I don't know.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I wrote down redemption, romance, revenge. The one that I was going to add was the fall.
Hey, I want to add to this. Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, his book on screenwriting, actually has a page that lists out the 10 major genres of storytelling. You'll have to read the book for details, but just listing them out, there's rite of passage, there's out of the bottle, there's why done it. Why done it would be like a movie like JFK, where you're investigating why did they do the assassination. Mm-hmm. And then superhero, the full triumphant, you know, just a whole bunch of genres. They're listed out in the book.
Yeah. And Blake Snyder's book is one of the few that I actually recommend. It doesn't matter if you're a screenplay writer or not. It is a fabulous, insightful read. But to blow your mind a little bit further, and I know I look at things a little different, but you've got all these different structures. The reality is, when it comes down to it, there's only one type of story. And that is someone going from one thing to something else. Because if there's no change, then
you wasted your time. Yeah.
There is no story. You have to deliver something. And it could be, the change could be the reader. So when you have, most tragedies are that way. So you take like King Midas. King Midas doesn't change. I mean, sure, he becomes a king who kills his family and can't eat and all of that. You could say that. But really, the change is in the reader. Same thing with like the Pied Piper. You know, a lot of those parables were there to change the reader. The characters in the stories ended up just having a tragedy. But that's where we learned. Their loss was our gain. And so, you know, that's another type to kind of think about. And so for me, really, everything is about that. Everything is just about, we're going to move from one thing to another. And that's a very simplistic way of looking at stories, I get. But I constantly keep that in mind, because that was my theme and theory in dynamic story creation of how do you force the reader to consume a message without ever mentioning that message. You make them love the character, you connect it to them so that they actually care about what that character is going to do. You have the character usually on the wrong side if you're writing a happy ending. Basically, the way it works is if the character doesn't get what they want, but they get what they need, it's a happy ending story. If the character does get what they want, it's a tragedy, because the only way, because now they're not growing, so they have to fall to let the audience understand that if they just had done that, they would have been better off.
I think about that all the time.
Yeah. And so really it comes down to structure. There's a ton to it, but when you boil it down to just its base, I feel like that's what it is. It's just, there's one type of story. And outside of that, you're right. It's just flat. And they've made stories like that. There's been many a movie like that. Was it Ex Machina? Was this really inventive thing? But when you watch it, not really much happens as far as character growth and everything. Now it's a perfect prologue, like when, you know, the android gets out with what she's done and kind of what you think that she's learned. You're like, wow, I can't wait to watch the actual movie of this. It's going to be fantastic. Same thing I feel about The Road. I mean, nothing happens in The Road, the movie or the book. And so, you know, and I get that there's a lot of fans of The Road, and
I liked it back in the day.
Love The Road.
I need to rewatch it though. Now that you say it's bad, I need to rewatch it and see.
Got to love Viggo Mortensen.
I personally hate that movie because at the end of it, I really wanted that boy to get raped, because nothing happened. Like, nothing happened. Like they just go off, like, and I'm just gonna pick on the movie here, but they go off and they get those the cannibal headhunters, and there's the guy peeing and he kills him, and it's like, oh, okay, this movie's gonna be about them chasing him, trying to get revenge. Nope, they never see them again. Then they find the stack of like all this food, and it's like, okay, this is what the movie's gonna be about. Somebody's gonna try to get that. Nope, they just live there as long as they want, take whatever they want, and then leave. And then there's a scene where they're walking down the road and this weird black guy shows up, and he's like, oh, okay, that's what's getting. Nope, that's a great guy. He just has, you know, camps with him, and it's wonderful, and it, you know, it's great. And then they finally get to the beach on the other side, and dad dies. And some strange dude comes walking up, and there's this kid next to his dead dad. And I'm like, dear God, just rape the kid. Something has to happen. Jesus. I want a child to be raped, but I'm like, literally seen this movie.
That's probably one of the hottest takes I've ever heard.
But no, the guy's just like, we're awesome foster parents. We're going to raise you in a perfect way in this post-apocalyptic world. And then the movie ends. And it's like,
you know, I hadn't thought about it like that.
I guess I'll have to see this movie and see what. I don't know anything about it. So
I have to say what left with me. You talked earlier about how, you know, people remember certain scenes from Finding Nemo, but they don't remember, you know, the gist of it. I definitely don't remember all those things from The Road, but the thing that stuck with me was that black ocean at the end.
Yeah.
It was just this depressing footnote of like, look what we've done. Look what humanity has created.
And but here's that's, you want to talk about a completely different genre. Literary fiction is that. You know, I don't like literary fiction. I will never read literary fiction. I will never write literary fiction, because literary fiction is that. It's these big esoteric themes that are not human themes. They are, and that's what The Road did. It was this basically bleak look at a future that is as what's the word I'm looking for? Crap, I hate chemo brain. Nihilistic. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, nihilistic.
It's a nihilistic view of the world. And so nothing happens because nothing is worth anything, and nothing will change anything, and nothing. So that's the theme that it's playing with. But the mass market is never going to fall in love with a movie about that, about, you know, just that nothing matters. There was this one literary fiction, this was years ago, but it won one of the big awards. And my wife, we were in a bookstore, and she was like, oh, look at this one, it won all these awards. And she read the back blurb and she gave it to me, and she's like, yeah, this is a book you're going to enjoy. And the back blurb literally said, you will not read this book for the characters, the plot, or the setting, because it has none of those. You will read this for the sheer enjoyment of reading the sentences as they are written. And I was like, yeah, no, I won't. Like, you could take that. But that's literary fiction. There is a genre for that. There is readers that love that stuff, and I'm not downing them. It's not for me. I also don't like country music, but country music makes a lot of money for people. I just can't. It makes my eyes bleed. Okay. So I'm not downing it. It's just not for me. And that's the way I've always been about literary fiction. It's a completely different, you know, non-structured, kind of much more esoteric thing that they're trying to. It's
Okay,
sort of like
could it-
modern art. I don't get modern art like.
Could I just ask what you mean? Like, how are you defining literary fiction in this context?
So literary
other
fiction,
books like that.
literary fiction are the ones that win awards and don't make any money, and mass market fiction, like I write, win no awards but make money. That's the difference. Literary fiction is only bought by college students who are forced to buy them because they're taking a class that requires it. I know
I've been there.
I'm being really, really
facetious.
But they're much more highbrow. They don't usually have a human thematic element. They usually don't have a character that you're going to relate to. The writers are usually playing with something that no one else has done in a story. And there's a reason why no one else.
It's experimental.
Okay. Yeah, so it's really experimental writing if you want to kind of look at it that way. And these are all my opinions. I am not the literary fiction expert. I just really enjoy picking on it.
Yeah, I've got another one that we could add. We're talking about I think our list here of redemption, romance, revenge, the fall, rite of passage, very interesting. One that I had on my list. We got about 5 minutes left. That gets told over again. I wonder where we put this on the list. Is Pygmalion. The idea of falling in love with your own creation, because we see that in My Fair Lady, Pretty Woman. She's all that, it comes back as a teen thing. Where do we put that? The idea of falling in love with your own creation, because obviously that's a story we're told over and over and over again, because we have these different incarnations. It's one I'm a fan of. I want to use that thing.
Lady, I will be that person. I hate.
Oh, you don't like?
I hate that they're supposed to be together after that. Yeah, I've worked that show too. It's beautiful. It's got beautiful music. The actors are incredible and stuff. I hate the story.
Well, now in that story in Pygmalion, they do not end up together. Yeah. And George Bernard Shaw wrote a thing about why they can't. Because I actually do love My Fair Lady. Because I'm not really a musical person, but whenever something that is, in a genre I don't typically like, but then I do enjoy that, I always take notice. Except for that movie that musical, I think falls apart at the very end, because they're not supposed to end up together at the end.
It doesn't make any sense.
So they blow it in the last scene in that. But nonetheless, that story of falling in love with your own creation, is there.
And that's what I will say. It's more the ending that I don't like about it, because I think her character is so interesting and has so much growth and stuff. And it bothers me. And I worked that show for a month straight. It hurts.
So I think another thing that people who don't like that might not even be picking up on. So I'll throw this at you to see if you didn't think about it this way. But one of the things that we also want to do for a happy ending story is the audience has to feel the characters deserve it. And I don't think he earned the right to be in a relationship with her.
Yeah.
You're right.
I agree with that.
And so when you do that, again, that's a code that kind of has to happen. That's why I always say you can't like your characters. You have to put them through the mill, because they have to earn what you're giving them.
Right. Yeah. She should have gone off and been with that other guy. Right. Yeah. It was her growth.
Her leaving.
She grew. She changed.
To me, and then they back up.
Right. And so and I don't know if you looked at it from that light, but I think I've thought about that a lot. And I think it's because that character never deserved. He never grew. He never changed to deserve. Sort of like the opposite is as good as it gets. When we meet Herman Melville, Jack Nicholson's character, he is a racist, homophobic, narcissistic jerk in the worst way. And that's a hard character to write. And the reason why that movie is so great is, first, after they hit you with the worst character you've ever, wanted to follow, they then hit you with all of these things that you're like, wow, okay, maybe if that was the life that led me there, maybe I would be kind of like that. Probably not, but maybe I'll give him a little bit. But he tries. He actually, and at the end of it, even though he's still not a great person, he's a person where you're like, you know what? I might now have coffee with him.
He's
I mean,
gross.
the first when I first met him, no, not even gonna. I'm gonna walk away from him. But now maybe I'd have coffee with this guy, and there's some potential there. Like, so he earns that relationship at the end, and so does she, because she also grows and changes, because he teaches her a ton of stuff as well. And so I think it comes down to that. I think it comes down to them actually earning the reward at the end.
Yeah.
And in My Fair Lady, he just doesn't.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an
I
excellent
agree.
point. All right. Well, we are just about at the end of our time. I will thank you so much for everybody for being here and being here in the chat. I'm gonna let everybody sign off here. Okay, Dax already signed off. No problem. But if you're here with us, thank you so much for being here. Please like and subscribe to the channel. On this channel, we talk about fantasy, we talk about sci-fi, we also talk about tabletop games, because I come out of the tabletop game side of things. And one of the things about this channel is that we try to be constructive, because we are all people here who are building our own things. We've got costumers, actors, the director of photography, Brianna, another writer and director, is on here all the time. So we are all people who are in the trenches of making our own stuff, our own shows, our own stories, toys, games, action figures, all of that stuff. So if you're looking for a constructive kind of place to hang out and talk about these things, please do consider subscribing to the channel and hang out with us more. Let's go around the circle again. I'll let Drake finish since he's our special guest. So I'll start with Megan, then Dax, then Brennan. You want to just tell everybody, where they can find you and what your current project is and where everybody can follow that and find out what's going on. Megan?
Yeah, I am at Megan Picco on Instagram. You can find me there. Currently in the theater world right now, so we'll see. But I do have a short film that's at the Sidewalk Film Festival here in Birmingham right now, and that's going to be coming up this week. So I am excited to see how that does and see it on the big screen.
Fantastic.
All right. Yeah, watch The Cultists. Watch everything on Heath's channel. My projects are still in development, so stay tuned. Yeah.
All right. I'm Brennan. You can find me on Instagram at Brennan Martinoni. It's all one. I'm sure Heath has it in the description.
It is. Yep. It is down
somewhere.
below.
It's a mouthful. I know. I'm sorry.
It's a name.
I'm also at BrennanMartinoni.com, and you can find me and a bunch of my short films that I've done on Vimeo under the same name. So yeah, and hopefully I'll have some new short films sometime next year, maybe the year after. We'll see.
All right. Drake, well, I've got your links below.
So yeah, I mean, the one thing I do love about my name is there's only one Maxwell Alexander Drake on the internet. So if you do Google that, you just get me, which is really nice. But Starving Writer Studio, all singular, starvingwriterstudio.com is where you can literally get, pretty much everything about me. If you like the way I teach, drakeu.com. I've got
you send us a discount code, which is very nice. If anybody is watching and you want to hang out on Drake U, General Geekdom discount code.
Yeah. So it's the name of the show. Just you put it in the description, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it's down below.
Because it is case sensitive. So look at how it's spelled. You get 25% off of the starting package, which is the only one that's really up. There's one standalone class, but again, we started launching this, got mostly ready to really start rocking and rolling on it, and then unfortunately things happen. But ton of stuff. Like I said, I've got a ton of stuff coming out. I'll have a Genesis Oblivion for those fans of that. I'll have that out right now. It's targeted to be June of next year. And then I don't know when The Realm's going to drop, because we do have to have 6 novels completely written and edited and ready to go before the first one drops, or we can't keep up with the every 3 month delivery date. So the boys, the other 3 writers, are trying to push for June so we can have it out for Comic-Con next year. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's not that I don't want it to happen. If we can make it happen, but cancer just put me down because the recovery was also rough on me. I've really only been working full days for maybe about 3 or 4 weeks now. So I'm just way behind on literally everything that I've got on my plate. But next year, definitely. It might be the 4th quarter though, or as late as the 4th quarter. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It's my magnus opus. It's the most complex, amazing story I've ever created in my entire life. We will start doing Realm roundtables on it, where we're going to do like 15 minutes with the 4 of us talking about specific aspects, nothing about the story, but a lot of the world building, a lot of the races and everything that went into the kind of the backside of it before the story starts. So, and then the newsletter will start. We've got a bunch of short stories that we wrote that are backstory pieces or whatever. So we're going to start sending those out. So Starving Writer Studio is the place to sign up for the mailing list to get all of that stuff as we start finally dropping it whenever it happens. And again, there's no release date right now because I'm still just coming out of recovery.
All right. Well, everybody follow there. Follow everybody. Links down below. You can find it all there.
Oh,
thank you all for being. Oh, yeah.
I always forget to do this. I am doing a podcast. Every time I say that, my fans are like, I didn't know you were doing podcasts. I think there's like 48 hour-long episodes now. Releasing Your Inner Dragon. It's on everything, including YouTube. I'm doing it with this Finnish writer. She is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. I shouldn't qualify it as woman because she is absolutely way smarter than me. And we have just a really great conversation, free flow. We don't, she picks the topic and we just talk for an hour. So if you like that more long form, about writing topics, Releasing Your Inner Dragon. Sorry, I just never promote that because I always forget that.
And it can be here on YouTube, and it's here on YouTube. Other places too, but we're here on YouTube, so you can find it here on YouTube. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, wonderful. We're out of here, everybody. Thank you. See you next week.